Well, hello and welcome to another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. This time we're on location. We're roving reporters on board a ship that's really been part of my life for as long as I can remember. It's the Waverley, the paddle steamer Waverley, the last seagoing paddle steamer anywhere in the world. And people have sort of asked about my background, a little bit about my family history. Well, I've taken the plunge, and this is sort of in that vein, really. My mother's side of my family are Scots through and through. And my great uncle Andrew was a ship's engine designer of a very clever chap, actually far cleverer than anybody I know. And he made scratch-built steam engines in his mum and dad's basement at the age of 12, and he went on to do some very good work indeed. So I was hugely inspired by him to go into things mechanical, and he actually died when I was very young, so I didn't get as much time to spend with him as I would have liked. But nevertheless, the stamp was cast, and I've been sailing on the Waverley for the last 52 years, since I was 6, 53 years. I'm going Doon the water, as they call it here in Scotland, a lot of the time. And I've been on her countless times, and it's an absolute privilege. The navigation company, the company that own the Waverley, have let me come here and have access to almost every area of the ship. And one of the beautiful things about the ship, the heart of this ship, is the steam engine. It's a 3-cylinder, triple expansion, 2,100 horsepower steam engine, and it's an absolute work of art. It really is. Apparently quite a few people agree with me. So here I am on the wing of the bridge. The Captain Alex and his crew have very graciously allowed me up here. And this is the first time I've been on this bridge since 1969. So we're going to be having a look at some of the aspects of the ship, but these really are a truly seminal experience. They're food for the soul, really, sailing on this ship. It's just stunning. The whole thing is almost a sensory overload. It's really, really wonderful. And I'm going to be meeting some interesting characters who've been part of the Waverley's history and very much still are. Whoops. And I'm going to be assaulted by a telegraph as well at some point in the not very distant future. But it is a working ship, so that's what you get for standing on the bridge, I guess. Yeah, it's just, this is a real part of my life that's been in my DNA almost from the word go. And welcome to a little bit of my world. Well, I'm joined by the historian and author and archivist Iain Quinn, who is up to his neck in the Waverley, I think it's fair to say. Iain, thank you very much for
lovely to meet you.
For making yourself available. So, obviously, what was your first experience with the Waverley?
Well, my father was a great Clyde steamer enthusiast, still alive, Iain, but he was a marine engineer but had connections like you in Doon. And my grandmother, his mother, had a house there, holiday house. His affection for the Clyde and the steamer started in Doon, and I was taken there on holiday to that house, and I needed no encouragement to be interested in this wonderful subject.
Right, the rest is history.
The rest is history, yeah.
Yes. And obviously the Waverley is the last seagoing paddle steamer in the world. I mean, what a marvel of engineering. I'm going to be looking at the engines later, but she ceased with Caledonian McGowan in 1973, and then she was bought for £1, wasn't she?
She was, and it's interesting now that this is 47 years that we've been operating the Waverley under the company of Waverley Steam Navigation, which is the flag you see flying from the mast of the Waverley today.
And it's almost a miracle she's still sailing, isn't it? Really?
Well, it's had a few hurdles along the way, and reboilerings as well, including the big one and the big announcement in 2019 that she was to be withdrawn from service, and that was really quite a shock to the world of the Waverley, that the summer timetable was already published, and lo and behold it was found that the boilers had some defects in them that determined that the best thing to do was to put the public aware of it, get an appeal started, and thanks to everyone who contributed, by Christmas time she had 2.3 million in her bank ready to take her in January 2020, 2 months before the world shut officially with the pandemic.
Of course.
And the Waverley, thanks to countless people, and the Scottish Government, she sailed again in August 2020.
For me, Waverley and Scotland are one and the same thing. I can't imagine Scotland without the Waverley, you know.
In our time, Iain, we could reminisce about things that we knew.
Yes.
But to most people now, in this day and age, the Waverley has become what she's doing now, and the last survivor of it.
Yeah.
Oh, to have 3 or 4 of these running around this wonderful estuary and up the west coast. But we're just lucky to have the one.
Absolutely.
We're very lucky to have the one. The waters that she churns out the window there, very, very special, and the only way to see them is from the decks of this ship.
Absolutely.
The whole Waverley story now is prize gold.
Yes.
It should never be destroyed. If you lose this, Iain, you've never got it again.
Absolutely. It's almost like a package, isn't it? You know, the beautiful seas, stunning scenery, fresh air, hopefully a bit of sunshine on a very good day.
The smell of steaming hot oil.
Exactly, the sound of the paddles, some lovely food, you know.
It all brings it
a wee dram if necessary.
A wee dram, a souvenir from the shop.
Yeah.
And the view of that magnificent engine along there.
Exactly, yes.
Brings it all into the last in the world.
It's food for the soul, it really is.
During the pandemic, when the world was getting a wee bit worried about whether it should come back to life again, those that booked for the Waverley were ever so pleased she was there.
Oh yes.
Because it brought people together that hadn't seen each other for all of that time.
Yes.
And she was a very clear link to the world of fresh air.
Yes.
COVID doesn't like fresh air, but the Waverley fell into that.
Probably doesn't like steam either.
It doesn't like steam either. And during that period, it became very special.
Yes.
To a lot of people that they could get aboard the Waverley and feel relatively safe.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm with the purser of the Waverley now, which is quite a pivotal job in the workings of the ship, Andrew. So what does the purser involve?
So the purser's job is really the person in charge of the revenue created on board, but also a very central figure in terms of the passenger experience. I welcome people on, I'm always at the gangways, so really you have to be the public face of the ship in a way, and I love the job. I've been doing it the past 2 seasons, and it's really a dream job for me.
Good. It's good to see some young blood getting involved, but you can't be an introvert in a job like that, can you?
No, I mean, as I say, you've got to be a central figure. You do have to be the public face of it, and you're often the last person someone on board sees as they go off, so that experience has to be a good one, and it can make or break it. So yes.
Lots of smiley faces.
Yes, indeed.
Because that's what makes people come back, isn't it? You know.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and there's nothing more satisfying than hearing people say they've had a great day, it's their first time on, and they will be back.
Yes,
it's wonderful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And what do you have any other sort of duties? I mean, in the event, you know, in the event of an emergency or an accident or something?
In that case, I would be in charge of an assembly station and in charge of directing and controlling passengers, issuing life jackets on the promenade deck.
Right. I have read some fairly colourful stories about pursers, the jams they found themselves in and things like that. But of course, that sort of thing doesn't go on in the 21st century.
No, of course
Everybody
not.
behaves themselves.
Absolutely.
No skullduggery.
No, not at all.
No.
It's a very unique job, I have to say. You don't get a lot of pursers and paddle steamers left.
No, it is a fairly...
Yes.
Yes. Of course, being a specialist in a narrow market is either an advantage or a disadvantage, depending on which way you look at it.
True, very true.
And are you, I mean, I'm asking a very contentious question here, but are you happy? You know, are you going
Certainly,
to be...
I mean, I've loved the ship since I was a wee boy. I've known it all my life, and I've been coming on for as long as I can remember. So I'm delighted to be here. I've been doing it for 2 seasons, and I hope to be here for a lot longer.
Oh well, you might end up being captain one day. You
I don't know about that.
All right, well, thanks very much, Andrew.
No bother at all.
All right.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Cheers.
But of course, the real wonderful uniqueness of the Waverley, not only is she a thing of beauty, that, as they say in shipbuilding terms, in those days anyway, if she looks right, she is right, which the Waverley most certainly is. And she's probably, I would say, one of the most beautiful ships afloat. But really, there is another area of beauty about the Waverley, and that is her fantastic triple expansion engine. And the cleverness of this is truly amazing. This was a very, very advanced steam engine design, triple expansion, which means that unlike a car engine, you get 3 bites of the cherry for 1 shot of energy. So in the middle of the engine, the very smallest cylinder is the high pressure cylinder, where the high pressure steam from the boiler goes into, and that then goes over to the starboard side of the ship to the medium or middle pressure cylinder, which is larger, and that's calculated to exert exactly the same pressure on the crankshaft as the high pressure, and then ultimately the steam that's left goes over the top of the one in the middle, the high pressure, goes to the low pressure cylinder, which is enormous by comparison, and that's the 3rd bite of the steam cherry that again is calculated very carefully and very cleverly so that the low pressure remnant of steam exerts the same pressure again on the crankshaft. So you end up with 3 equal pushes from 1 shot of steam across the engine. Incredibly clever stuff. And the whole ship is full of features like that. Too much to go into in this video. You've got the exquisite reversing gear that goes up and down as the engine changes direction to alter the valve timing. But the crankshaft alone weighs 8 tons in the engine, and the engine really is a thing of beauty. It's just an incredibly clever piece of kit. It's located in the middle of the ship, and then you have these walkways that you walk over, the shafts going out to the paddles either side. And again, the paddles are an incredibly clever bit of kit because the paddle blades that go in the water, the wooden blades, are feathered by an offset wheel in the middle of the paddle that actually ensures that as the paddles hit the water, they are exactly vertical and you get maximum effect, which then stay vertical while they do their work. I mean, just incredibly clever. The Scottish really did lead the world in steam engine engineering at this time. Well, Iain, could you tell us a little bit about the history? I mean, you're extremely well placed to do so.
Well, it's a very interesting and colourful history for the Waverley. It goes back to 1940, and in the very early stages of the Second World War, there was a Clyde steamer called the Waverley, commanded by John Cameron, who in peacetime was released by the Admiralty to oversee the building of this ship, which was that Waverley's effective replacement.
Right.
And he got the Distinguished Service Cross for the Dunkirk campaign, where the old Waverley under his command was bombed and sunk by the German raiders, coming back from Britain as the Waverley returned from Dunkirk to Britain. She was a sitting target for them, and sadly she didn't come home. A lot of people lost their life, but John survived it. Became a close neighbour of mine in Glasgow, in fact, and devoted himself to the preservation of the Waverley. So there's that link. But she was the effective replacement for that, built in the same shipyard as the old Waverley, which is where the Riverside Museum is now in Glasgow. And it was A&J Ingalls Point House shipyard that constructed the Waverley between December 1945 and the launch in 1946 on the 2nd of October. She was delayed in fitting out because of the severity of the winter of 47, so she didn't appear in service until midsummer, 16th of June 47, right, because of the severity of the weather. But it became an Indian summer and very hot, so she kicked into touch at the right time. She was owned then by the London and North Eastern Railway, who still survive to this day, operating the train from Glasgow to King's Cross. They had her for 1 year, and then nationalisation of the railways came in 1948, and the Waverley passed to the British Transport Commission, who were a subsidiary of what was to become British Railways. And she became part of the Clyde Coast Steamer Services, operated in Scottish region of the BR Empire.
Right. And
she remained with them until 1972. Under the BR flag here was the Caledonian Steam Packet Company.
Yep.
And they kept her in business until 1972, and they passed her over to Caledonian McBrain, and the joining of the Caledonian and the David McBrain Company were twinned to form Calmac in 1973, nearly 50 years ago, and the Waverley survived with them for one summer. And then the company management at Calmac at Gourock saw that the Waverley was very special as the last paddle steamer in the world going to sea. They gifted her to the nation through the Paddle Steamer Preservation Society, and they gave her away for £1, which in turn they donated, but they needed the £1 to make it legal.
Right.
But they donated the £1 back, and on the 8th of August 1974 she was handed over to the nation through the Waverley World, and here we are.
Yes.
Iain still paddling on.
Yes.
48 years after the handover.
Fantastic. So she's probably sailed more time under private preservation time than she did as a working steamer then.
She has, and in 1975 to 1977 she sailed in the Clyde predominantly, but a booking came in 1977 early on for the centenary of the pier at Llandudno in North Wales, a pier that she still uses, thankfully.
Yep.
An old Victorian pier, kept its original standard,
Yes.
And away she went to Liverpool in North Wales,
Yes.
and that opened the floodgates to taking the Waverley to other corners of Britain. So by 1981 she was circumnavigating Britain, visiting ports and harbours that had never seen her before. The same again in 1982 and 1983, and then settling into a programme which takes her now to the Western Isles of Scotland, the Clyde in the summer,
Yes.
Liverpool and North Wales in the autumn, and that will happen again in 2023, the South Coast and the Thames, and all being well, fingers crossed, one of the mainstays of the empire really beyond the Clyde is the Bristol Channel, and hopefully that will return in some fashion in 2023 again. But she's off to the south in the Thames, and she's done that since 1978.
Yeah, beautiful. Going under the Tower Bridge.
Seeing the Tower Bridge in London open for the Waverley is probably one of the best experiences you could ever witness.
Yeah.
It brings London to a standstill for 5 minutes, and the economy of London shuts down while the Waverley moves.
There's not many things could do that.
Not many, but the Waverley does it. Iain.
But it also proves her seagoing credentials. I mean, the Hebrides, the Western Isles, you know, the sea can be very rough out there.
The Western Isles probably not so much, but you're right. The further out the west you go, the worse it would become in weather conditions such as you're describing. But such is the wonderful west of Scotland, there's always a beautiful sea loch to nip into and get away from the weather.
That's very true.
And somebody knew what he was doing when he put paddle steamers on the Clyde estuary, where it takes very, very stormy weather to shut it down.
Yes.
It can sail almost in anything and not cause a worry to the world.
What
really.
can she sail in actually? What sort of winds?
A good force 5 or 6.
Yes.
She can sail quite comfortably. The beauty of the Clyde is you're not in bad weather for any length of time.
Right. Yeah.
At the worst you're out in it for half an hour and then you're tucked into shelter again.
Right.
Well, here we are, and I've been showered with impressive and important people today for various reasons in the Waverley story, but this gentleman here is an unexpected surprise. Mr. Doug McGowan, thank you for taking the time to speak with me. You are the gentleman, the visionary, who handed over the £1 note for Waverley, are you not?
I am. There were two of us in this story. My good friend and colleague Terry Sylvester from Barry, and the two of us got together on my 21st birthday in 1969. We were introduced as two guys with ideas really about the Waverley. At that time the Waverley was the last seagoing paddle steamer in Europe, now of course the last seagoing paddle steamer in the world. And we decided, Terry and I, to try and persuade Caledonian McBrain to keep this steamer going for as long as possible.
Right. And that wasn't the case, of course, was it?
Well, to be fair, they kept her going until 1973.
Yes.
And we advised them in marketing and various other ways of, ideas to get more passengers up the gangway and make her stand out from the fleet of car ferries, which is what they ran, and make her a bit special. And they He made one or two changes in colour schemes and that sort of thing. But ultimately, they took her out of service at the end of 1973. She needed money spent on the boiler and the paddles and the decks, and she was uneconomic. But then, to our utter surprise, I got a phone call one day, will you come down to our head office at Gourock? And the managing director, John Whittle, said, we have decided, because of all the interest that you and Terry, representing the Paddle Steamer Preservation Society, have shown over the years, our board have decided to offer you the Waverley for £1 to make it legal. Well, I thought it was a wind-up at first, but then realised it was a genuine offer, and we launched a public appeal in 1974. At first we thought, let's lay up the Waverley in a dock in Greenock as a floating club for our members, and then we thought, well, let's have a go at running this thing, and we launched an appeal. We got £100,000, quite a lot of money in 1974, and there was obviously a huge amount of interest in Glasgow in the west of Scotland in the Waverley, massive, because she was the last of the line and she represented this age-old tradition of going down the water for a sail, you know, with Mawpaw in the wind, and this was the last of the Clyde paddle steamer. So the public appeal was very successful, and then we had to start recruiting for crew, officers, set up an office in Glasgow, and we thought, crikey, have we bitten off more than we can chew, because I had a full-time job, Terry had a full-time job, and we were absolute volunteers. But we got the show on the road, and we set up a good team in Glasgow, a captain and chief officer and engineers and all the rest of it. And largely the rest is history. She's one of the most famous ships in the world now. And to come on board here and see that triple expansion engine open to the general public, and I love to see families on board with children and seeing their eyes pop out their head as they watch the engines going round, you know, that for me has made it all worthwhile. We've had our ups and downs, yeah, and Waverley's a challenge every single year and becoming a bigger challenge to bring her out every year, but as time goes on she becomes even more special.
Yes.
She's a relic from the past, and you know, she's a living museum. She really is.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I mean, I don't know what more I can ask you, because you've just explained it in about 5 sentences. But I mean, it's, you know, it's there are so many preserved pieces of machinery, whether they be Gresley designed steam locomotives or whatever. But to actually have this living, breathing, working steamship, you know, as you say, I mean, they were tremendous in their day. Everybody from society had access to a paddle steamer because they were very cheap to cruise on, weren't they, if you wanted them to be. And they were a great leveller in that respect.
Oh yes, at the turn of the century, at the beginning of the 20th century, there'd be probably 50 or 60 paddle steamers on the Clyde, all run by 7 or 8, 9, 10 different companies.
Yes.
And they would race for the pier.
Yes.
And see who could get to the pier fastest. And the pier would have a special signalling code to let them in.
They had the discs, didn't
The
they?
discs on the pier, and the steamer that got to the pier the fastest, well, that's the steamer that the public like to be on. But going back to the paddle steamer Columba in 1878, she had her own hairdresser, her own post office. I mean, absolutely amazing. And she took the gentry to Tarbert and then over to up to the Western Isles, to their crofts and their, you know. But it's great. This is the last of the line, and for me, just standing at the bow there, listening to the paddles going round, maybe with a little refreshment in my hand. I mean, it's so relaxing. And when I step on board here, I'm in a different world. I'm taken away into a different world, and it's to be at sea on a proper seagoing paddle steamer is just a special experience. And I think, you know, most people coming on board the Waverley will realise that they are doing something quite special now.
Yes.
And I just hope we can keep this old lady going for some time yet and we've carried something like over 6 million passengers since the ship was preserved in 1975. About 6 million passengers we've given pleasure to, perhaps with family and young children. So I think it's been worth it. Some people, when I say I got the Waverley for £1, they say you were robbed. Well, maybe I was. It's probably cost us 50, 60 million to keep her going since, but I think it's been worth it.
Yes. On behalf of those 6 million people, I want to say thank you. Thank you, Douglas.
Thank you, Iain. Thank you very much.
Well, here we are in the engine room, or just close to it. I'm going to go and join Tim now, the chief engineer, who is responsible for this amazing piece of machinery. Just to give you fair warning, it's very noisy. But anyway, let's go and meet Tim. Hello, Tim.
Hello and welcome to my engine room.
Oh, even the seats warm.
Everything's warm in this engine room, yeah.
Well, this is such an honour for me to be on this footplate, because I've been travelling on this since I was 6.
That's a long time.
And I'm biased, of course, because I am, you know, a nutter, as they call people who are enthusiasts for this ship. To actually be this on the footplate with this beautiful triple expansion engine, which I'm going to unashamedly say is probably one of the finest steam engines in the world.
That's right, and one of the, surprisingly, despite its age, it's actually got one of the biggest pistons on any ship at sea.
Really?
Yeah, the low pressure piston's one of the biggest at sea.
Wow. What diameter is it? 66 inches. Right, so that's 5.5 feet in old money.
That's right, so that's actually a very big piston. And I've worked on some of the biggest engines at sea, and that's still a pretty impressive diameter.
Yeah, wow. And so, as I understand it, high pressure in the middle here, and then low pressure over there.
That's right, yeah. So it works on the triple expansion system. So the steam's coming in at high pressure from the main boilers next door, through the regulating valve, which I've cunningly got my foot resting on, and then we control the position of the regulating valve with the regulating lever on the control console here. So that actually decides how much of the pressure from the boiler I admit into the first stage of the engine, which is the high pressure cylinder.
Yeah, got you. Now, obviously, this is the original engine from 1947.
That's right.
And it was rebuilt, the crank came out in 2003, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Obviously, a steam engine functions in a different way from an internal combustion. You don't have that shock load of the combustion on the connecting rod and the big end, etc.
That's right.
It's more of a gradual thing. But even so, the torque of this is phenomenal, isn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely.
For the size of engine, the horsepower is quite low. It's 2,100 horsepower, which in modern terms doesn't seem like a lot. But the torque it can generate is incredible, because when we actually stop the ship, unlike a conventional ship where you've got the propellers and you sort of stop your engine and the propellers freewheel down to a stop, when they want to stop on the Waverley, they actually want the paddles to stop. So from an ahead position with the engine running ahead, you have to go astern on the engine, apply steam to it. So you can imagine the torque on those great big paddle wheels that are turning in the ahead direction, and you've actually got to sort of lock them solid to act as brakes to stop the ship.
Yeah, and it probably stops on a sixpence under those conditions.
It stops pretty well, and then of course the captain has to go astern, so it's usually a half or a full astern straight through on the movement. So you'll be going from maybe slow ahead, they'll ring stop, which means stop the engine, and within seconds they'll be ringing half astern or full astern, and you've got to get the engine to stop and then turn in the opposite direction.
Which of course involves moving the valve gear, etc.
That's right, with the reversing engine. And of course people, they'll think, they come on board the Waverley and they say, oh, you've got a great big steam engine. What they forget is we actually got 11 steam engines on board altogether. And the reversing engine, which turns the timing gear, is only one of them. So the big one turning the paddle wheels, the little one just to go astern, but lots of other steam engines as well. Yeah,
you've also got the capstans at the bow and the stern for
That's
moving
right.
the ropes.
So you've got those. The steering gear is driven by a small steam engine. You can hear chugging away in the background one of the two feed pumps, which put the condensed water back into the boiler. We've got an air pump which creates the vacuum within the condenser to draw the steam through the cycle on the engine. We've got 2 steam-driven fire and general service pumps as well. So altogether, it's a steam enthusiast's sort of dream, I would guess.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing I'm sticking my neck out here, but I think it probably had 2 less steam engines than it did at one time.
That's right. In the early days, they used a lot less electrical power than we do now, so they had 2 small steam generators.
Yes.
I am told, I wasn't around at the time, but I'm told that in those days there were only 2 light bulbs in the engine room.
Really?
Yeah, so I'm told. I'm glad to say we can see where we're going these days.
Well, I mean, you've got navigation lanes, refrigeration equipment for all the food, etc. You know, it's a whole different world, isn't it?
It is. I mean, people wouldn't expect to go around in those conditions now, and I believe they had a coal-fired range in the galley and a coal-fired range for heating the accommodation.
That's just a fire waiting to happen, isn't it?
Well, yes. So things have progressed, but of course, the majority of the ship's fabric is original.
Yeah.
You know, it's a strange combination because we're here in the engine room, where nearly all of the equipment is the original 1947 fit-out. But forward of here, we step into the boiler room, where our boilers are only 2.5, 3 years old. And we've got 3 diesel generators in there the same age. Our oily water separator for processing bilge water is the same age. So it's a strange combination of stepping through a door and going forward in time 75 years, or even stepping back and going back 75 years.
Yeah. Well, I noticed, I've been on the Waverley regularly, I noticed that the ambient noise in here is less than it used to be. Because with modern common rail diesel generators, they're quieter. They're much quieter than the old
Scania
pump-fed, crack diesel engines.
That's right.
But I'm curious to know, obviously it had done a gazillion miles, the engine, between 1947 and 2000. Hundreds a day, really, in the height of its, in the height of her sailing. How much wear was there on the crankshaft, for example?
Virtually nothing.
I thought you were going to say that.
Virtually nothing. I think the question that was asked after it had come out was, why did we take it out?
Really?
Yes. It was that good.
Because I know the main bearings were white metal, for example.
Yeah, there was wear in the white metal, but the actual crankshaft and so on, everything was very, very good condition.
So it didn't have to be reground to a smaller size?
Very little work done on the engine at all. It was taken out, everything was balanced again, and when they did the laser alignment on it, they found out that the original engineers back in 46, 47 had got everything spot on. There was nothing they could do to improve it.
Obviously on a crankshaft like this, you get deflections, don't you?
And the fact that it's on a ship as well, so sometimes it's supported in water, other times it's in the dry dock, supported on blocks, so that makes a difference on a big structure like this.
Yeah, because if the hull moves, the engine moves.
That's right, yeah.
But the deflections were negligible?
Negligible.
What a tribute to amazing
1946, 47 engineers. And when you think that the guys who designed and built this, they didn't have access to computers, calculators, anything like that. It was literally on the drawing board with a slide rule, and away they went. And when you see the actual movement of the engine and the parts, especially like the Stevenson timing gear there, I look at it and people say, isn't it an incredible engine? I say, that's not an engine, that's a work of art. And when you see the movement of those, that's poetry in motion.
Yes.
It's quite mesmerising to sit there and just watch the rocking.
Yeah. But she sounds so happy as well.
Yeah, she's very happy. She's just chugging along. We're half speed now, doing our cruise. Everyone on board's happy. There's very little vibration on the ship. Smooth operation.
But I'm just being a little bit, maybe a bit too open here. You've slowed her down a little bit so we can have this interview.
We have had this, but it's very pleasant. Some of the cruising we do is at much slower revs than this. We'll go down to slower head, but none of the guys need to wear ear defence. They choose not to because they say,
Yeah. So when we finish chatting, you're going to speed her up to...
We're probably going to speed up. I'll give it back to the captain. He's very kindly agreed to slow down for our little chat. But we'll let him know the chat is over and see what he wants to do.
Do you mind if we film that process happening?
No. We can film that, see how it goes.
Tim, thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure having you here. I'm glad we got somebody who takes that much interest.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, for those of you who like it hot, this is hot. These are the two boilers that feed the huge steam engine and they are operating at well over 200 degrees C. And in here it's actually knocking on for 60 degrees C. So it's certainly warm enough. I'm not going to spend too long in here because I like it hot, but there are limitations. Well, here I am in the inner sanctum and Captain Alex and his crew have very generously let me relive a moment that I had 53 years ago when I stood on a box behind the helm and steered the Waverley as a young boy and thought all my Christmases had come at once. And for the first time in 53 years, I'm going to do that today. Thank you.
118.
Where am I looking, sorry?
1 second. Compass up here.
Ah, 118, okay.
So a lot to starboard. Keep moving. Keep moving. This is your rudder indicator here, so.
Oh, I see, right.
Let's give it a bit more.
Wow. Here we go.
Take it off now. Midships.
It's quite a business, isn't it?
Yeah, you need to be on your toes, or she'll get away from you. The least helm you can use, the easier it becomes.
Of course, I see that.
Lots of helm you're going to see, so.
This is quite a moment. It's looking pretty good now.
What you tend to find is she'll always seek the wind, so we've got the wind on the starboard bow, and that's the way she's going to turn.
Right.
She'll always turn into the wind.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's not easy, is it?
It's actually easy when you've got a bit of wind, because she'll always seek the wind, so all you're doing is counteracting.
Ah, okay. Failing dismally here.
Right. Just 5's enough.
Okay. That's better.
The least amount of helm you use, the easier it becomes.
Of course, so you're not zigzagging. Yeah.
You can always tell a good helmsman if you go outside and look at the wake.
Oh. Oh, please don't.
If it's nice and straight, you've done a good job. If it's all over
Oh,
the place,
no,
more practice required.
I couldn't stand the humility. I think I'd be good in a destroyer with a U-boat chasing me or whatever, zigzagging.
You'll be surprised, give it 1 or 2 days and you'll be fine.
Are you looking at the wake?
Yes.
Pretty awful, is it?
I'll let you decide.
that was tactful. Oh dear. My Yachtmaster certificate's in the post, I think. Not. You can actually see it on the pro, can't you? It's more of a guide. I'm watching the compass, but
Yeah. That's your best references.
Yeah, I'm busy watching that, but actually, good old-fashioned looking at the foremast.
Quite often we'll give the crew a landmark to aim for. Some prefer a compass course, some prefer a landmark. I always found it easier if we had land, something to steer for. It was always easier.
That's better. I'm much happier with that. What an experience, though. Thank you for letting me do this. That was an unbelievable privilege. It really was. Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
You made a middle-aged man very happy.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Well, that's the perfect end to a perfect day. Thank you very much for watching. I know it's been longer than usual, but we'll be back with something else very soon.